My session is going to be crafting responsive Canvas Power Apps. My name's Keith Atherton. I've met some of you. It's great to see some familiar faces here. Some folks I've not seen for a while, and other folks as well. I'm a Power Platform solution architect. Get up to some other community shenanigans now and again as well. But if anyone's got any questions and we don't find time during the session, hopefully we'll get some time at the end for some quick Q&A. If not, just reach out to me online. Always happy to help out if I can. So just scan the QR code or just find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. There aren't going to be many slides to this. I'm going to be mostly hands-on, but the things we're going to cover are why would we want a responsive app, model-driven app responsiveness, just to look at that briefly. The bigger part will be the Canvas app responsiveness options, and then a brief look at some multi-device layout patterns, in particular a blog post that's really useful just to outline those. So let's bring up a Power App right here. So first up, I'm just going to show very, very briefly, in fact, you know what, before I jump to the app, one thing I'll mention is really, responsive apps or responsive web design. There are many reasons why we might want this, but some of the core ones are, I've gone to W3 Schools. There are other good sites there as well for web development and so on. But it's really about getting the web pages or the screens that will look good on multiple devices. So if we've got different screen sizes and different viewports, so this mock-up they've got here is with a laptop, a tablet, and a mobile device. It might be that you've got different aspect ratios or different resolutions, or you might have it in a portrait mode or a landscape mode. So the short version really is just to make sure that it's a slick experience for users, no matter what that device is. Now, if I scroll further down, again, this is a bit more of a web dev focus to start with. I know many others, Charles and many others who've got that kind of a background might be familiar with this. If we go to this example here in this CSS snippet, there's really a concept known as media queries. And really what this is doing behind the scenes, again, this is a bit of a pro code geeky way of doing it, but you're really specifying that if that width reaches certain breakpoints, then you might adapt the layout of the elements on the screen based on that width. So again, if you've got a big wide screen, you might be able to fill it, just as this page does right here. If you've got something in portrait on a small mobile device, you might actually show and hide different elements or change that big menu to a small hamburger menu or do other things based on that size. So really that's kind of a bit of background on how responsive web design is done when it's code-based that way. Now, some of us who may have built some websites and things like this may be used to different frameworks as well. So a common one out there, one I use quite often, and it gets loaded with other frameworks, is Bootstrap. So this is a great way where they can provide some of their own controls, but handle that responsiveness for us as well. It saves us a lot of work. Super, super useful. Now, Bootstrap, I'll just go down. This is free to use. We can use it right here. There's various ways of getting hold of it. If I go to some examples at the top, we can go down. We can see it gives us different layouts and different controls that could be useful as well. So this can give us a good starter for 10. We can then customize things beyond this, set our own styling, change other things that we need to as well. But again, one of the big parts of this is that it handles that responsiveness for us out of the box. It's a big time saver. So if I go to the Bootstrap grid system, again, this is quite Bootstrap specific, but it gives us some background on responsive design. So right here, they've got this Flexbox grid, just to explain how they do it. And they've also got a 12-column system. They split the page. So any thoughts in the chat or otherwise why we might have 12 columns or why that would be useful? I'll keep an eye out and let's see. Yes, big Franco's there. Big fan of the Bootstrap. Love it. Great stuff. Okay, so I'll jump to the reason for this. Yeah, super useful. So one of the reasons there's 12 columns is that the number 12's got many divisors. So you can divide it into thirds, quarters, halves. So the great thing with the grid system is that you've got a lot of flexibility there. There's lots of different layouts you can have. So things like here where we've got 3 equal columns, we might go further down where we might get a mix of different things, halves, thirds, and so on like that. So again, having something like a 12 means we've got lots of options available. And that's really how Bootstrap works in a nutshell anyway. So if I jump back to the Power App world, the first thing I'm going to look at here is a model-driven app. And the great thing with model-driven is they're going to have responsiveness out of the box. So again, another massive time saver that does the work for us. So if I go to one of these forms right here for some account management and go down to here, if we look at this main section, we've really got 3 columns. So we've got this main information, new section, and primary contact, and so on. So if I reduce the width of this, those 3 columns eventually go down to 2. Again, there's likely going to be a breakpoint in use around this point when it snaps between the 2 and the 3. And again, if I go further again, that 2 goes down to a 1, and those different sections have been stacked vertically. So we can still access them, but it's adapted, it's been responsive, it's changed the layout for us. So may not always be the layout changes that we want, but by using this pattern, it's known as the column drop pattern, it's actually done the work for us and made it responsive. So again, there's a massive time saver with that, and it could be useful on many different devices. So it's super, super useful. However, if we go to Canvas app, and as the name suggests, we've got the blank canvas, which means we've got to do the work ourselves if we want to make it responsive, then we do have a few other options to implement that as well. So the first thing we'll look at is if we're going to go ahead and add a new screen. Now, we do get some options out of the box for responsive design. So we've got things like split screens, sidebars, and header and footer. And with many web pages and different apps, these can be quite common layouts, quite useful. So again, they're going to be a useful starting point if we want a responsive design. We could probably see from the previews as well. Let's say this is a bigger screen right there with a left and a right container. But on a portrait mobile device, we've got them switched to be upper and lower. So you can maybe see how the layouts may change depending on what we use there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and have a look at this sidebar as an example of what that can look like. Okay, so all I've gone and done here is just chosen that sidebar screen and give it some lovely pastel colors and just a bit of text to identify which of those different parts of the screen that we have. So right now we've got a header, a sidebar, and a main content right there. So if I go ahead and put this in preview mode, and again, just change this width, we'll see there'll come a point where that layout does change and it does stack them vertically, almost like the suggested one we could see in the preview. So again, there's a great way of getting some responsive design without having to build it from the ground up. So it can give us a starting point, or we might want to change the layout that it provides, change the proportions of the screen it takes up and so on, but that can give us a really good starting point. So another thing we can do as well, while in here as well, again, I just crudely move the width of the screen just to sort of change the layout. But if we did want to actually test to say what would this look like on a different device, there are a few ways where we can actually use the dev tools within the browser. We can actually go ahead and put it in device mode and actually change that right here if we need to. But one of the useful things with Canvas apps is we've actually got this device preview feature right here. So we can go ahead and say, okay, I want to see what this looks like on an Apple iPad 10.2. Kind of mimics what the device would be. And then we can kind of get like a rough idea. It's a bit boxier. It's not quite the same 16:9 or widescreen ratio that we've got. And we can go ahead and actually just test, what different devices would look like. The other good option, we've got these tablets right here. We can specify a custom if ours isn't listed in these commonly used ones. We can change the phones as well and actually see, what that would look like there as well. And we've also got the option right here where we can change that orientation between portrait and landscape as well. So a super useful way of getting a good preview of what it would look like. However, saying that, I would say nothing really beats getting hands-on with the actual devices. I've actually had this on a few projects where not having the actual devices, we've then found out later on that the customers used a device that's maybe been in a kiosk mode. It's actually had some of the borders around it and actually taken some of that screen real estate away. Or where they've actually had scaling or zooming on the device as well, just to increase that font size. And again, that's had some impact on the layouts and the responsiveness. So really getting the hands on the actual physical devices, it is really that's the ideal if you can do that. So I'll go ahead and move that back into the window size. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is just have a look at this. If I expand this in the tree view, we can see this is actually made up of several containers. And they're really kind of like the key part of responsive design within Canvas Power Apps. So it's really that they'll control the layout. And what we've got is actual controls that are actually based in those different containers. And the containers handle all the movement and the changes to the layout. So if we look at some of these components a bit more, I'll move on to a new blank screen. I'm going to go ahead and go to Insert and look at Layout. And we've got a few options. So we've got several galleries and then several containers as well. Just going to have a look at a few of these. So first up, a few things that we can use with galleries and other controls as well. I'll just go ahead and add one with this lovely sample data that it provides us with. Let's move this to the origin right up there. Let's just whack a border on that so we can see it as well. There we go. So some things we can do with this is, again, bearing in mind responsiveness, it might be that we're scaling things related to the parent or to other controls. So something as simple as selecting this gallery. Let's go ahead and change the width to the parent width, which is actually the screen. We could do the same with the height as well. Just to snap it to its surroundings as well. So the more we do that with containers or sub-containers and go further down the tree view, if you change anything at the parent level, it would then change anything that's contained within it as well. Let's just reduce that a little more. I will go ahead and get rid of this lovely layout, and I'll just make a blank layout right there, actually. Let's change this. I'll go ahead and change the template size to something less complex. Here we go. We can do the same as well within the cells, within the gallery as well. So if I go here and add a text label, I'll just snap that to 00. Again, the other thing we can do with those contain controls is just reference anything within the parent as well. So if I want this width to stretch all the way across, I can actually just go ahead and change that to the template width for the gallery as well. I'll go ahead and just set a color just so we can see how that looks. Nice green. Okay, I'll go for that. And actually just center align that text as well. So yeah, we can see things in there. So there's just a few ways there. Again, we can snap to the surroundings or any of those parent controls or parent containers as well. So super, super useful. Next up, another good building block for the responsive design. I'll go ahead back to the layout. Let's choose this container right here. And let's move this down here. So the great thing with this container, this is more of the standard container, I would say. With this, we can actually place some controls within it. The good thing and the downside potentially as well is we've got freedom to place where these controls go, which is good. But it doesn't mean that they'll by default get dynamically laid out or change position based on what we do. We've actually just fixed the position where we want those controls. But if we want something where we're going to have some kind of dynamic layout, we can actually go back to the other containers and either use the horizontal container or the vertical container. So I'll go ahead and pick this horizontal one. Let's move this down here, stretch this across. Now with this one, I'm going to add a few buttons to this one. Let's add a few more. And what they're doing is they're actually dynamically stacking them from left to right. So it's gone from this origin at the top left, moving them across. So again, they're not manually placed with that full control, but it does mean that they're actually being handled by this container. But well, we'll go through some of the properties on why it's doing that, but that's a way that it's being handled. So depending on the size, it might, handle it if they need to wrap around or something like that as well. So let's just get this slightly nicer looking. We have a gap property right there. We'll just get some gap between them. Let's whack some padding on there as well. So we just move it away from the edge. So far, so basic. One thing we can do within this container as well, we've got a few options here for things like horizontal overflow, where we can either hide it or add some scroll bars. Same for vertical, that's also an option. And also we've got this wrap property as well. So let me go ahead and select these buttons. I'm just going to change that Yeah, no, the width is fine. That's fine. So if I reduce this container's width and just move it, we can see it's actually trimming what's visible for those components. But if I actually go ahead and use this wrap property right there and turn this on, it's actually going to dynamically lay out these controls. Again, depending on the solution, that might be something we want or we don't want, but it's something where it's keeping them visible, which in many cases might give a good user experience every time. So let's just bring that back to the full width. Right, I'll go ahead with these buttons. So let's see what else we have with these as well. We've got a few options with these contained controls, these buttons as well. So we've got aligning container right here. We've got things like a flexible width. So I'm just going to turn that on. And now they're actually filling the width of that container within it as well. Let's go ahead and select them again. We've got a few other options with the alignment as well, which could be useful as well. So we've got them at the start, which is at the very top. We could change this. Let me just set my container for these actually. Let's go back in there. Let's make sure I've got all of those in there. Oh, I think I've not changed another property. Sorry, one moment. So let me just grab all these again. There we go. And yeah, so we do have some other options where we can change the placement within that container as well. We can actually change the portions that it fills as well. So right now I've got 5 buttons in there and they've just equally taken up the width within the container there. But we can actually change these proportions based on a percentage, or again, that 12 grid system to say how much of that space that I want them to take up. So I'll just go ahead and change a few numbers in there. Let's change this. I think I've missed one of the properties actually. Let me see. Let me go back in here. No, I think I'm missing one of the properties. But yeah, what we can do with these buttons, if I get it working next time, is that we can actually change this proportion. So a bit like on that grid system that we saw on the other one, I might want to say, well, I want this first button to take up, say, 50% of the width, and then divide the rest with those other buttons across the others as well. So we can actually change this layout if we need to. So again, could be really, really useful if we need to fill that space, whether it be a wide screen or a small screen or whatever the case may be. So yeah, really, really useful. Okay, so next up, I'm just going to have a look at something known as the screen size as well. So there's a really good article on Microsoft Learn about building responsive apps and how the design works. And they mention here about these breakpoints that we've got. So within the width, we do have these breakpoints. We do have some by default. So for tablet or web, we've got this 600, 900, 1200. And for phones, we've got these other values right here. And just to show it visually, we've actually got it broken down to say, well, for the tablet, if that width is between 0 and 600, classing it as a small screen, giving it numbers as well. Larger, up to 900 medium, and then large, and then extra large as well. So these are defaults. These can be changed. If I just go back to the app, if I go to this app object and then go to size breakpoints, that's where they're stored right there. Again, the cool thing with this is we can actually change them, add to them, have many others if we want to as well. I'll actually go ahead and just keep these defaults in there. But what we can do, I'll go ahead and preview this. I've actually just got it to the window size just to show these different screen sizes and that they're visible based on this width. So I'm just showing the width. I'll actually go ahead and change this. So if I move this further down and I go below that 1200, it's now showing as a screen size large. If we go further again, we'll reach the medium. And if I really squish it, then we get to the small right there as well. So again, there are ways we can identify what category that screen size might be and then change the layout depending on that if we need to. So next up, I'll show something with galleries as well, which can handle this quite easily for us. So this could be quite useful. So I've got a gallery right here. All I've got at the top is a header, just showing similar to before. I've got the width, I've got the screen size, but also how many columns I want to show for the gallery. So this gallery's just got numbers 1 to 100. I just use sequence just to generate those. And at the moment, I've got 4 columns based on this extra large screen. So if I go ahead and preview this, so you can see if I scroll through, it's just numbers, nothing meaningful there. But if I go ahead and actually change the width of this screen and actually move it further down, I said if I go from an extra large to a large, I've actually changed it from 4 columns to 3 columns. So that way we're actually changing it, but still keeping them wide enough and readable enough that we can actually go through those. So if I go further again, I'm actually taking it medium to 2 columns, and then further down to 1 column. So again, it's almost like dealing the way we can with containers, but actually this is built in quite easily within galleries. I'll actually just show where this is set. So yeah, if we go to the gallery right there, I'll go down to this wrap count property right here. And all I've done there is just saying based on the size, I've actually just referred to those enumeration values, that small, medium, large, and extra large. I've actually gone ahead and just set the amount of columns that I want to show. Again, this could be a hard-coded value, but I've actually just based it on the screen size just to make it adaptable. So hopefully that part makes sense. Great. Okay, so the next thing, the last thing in terms of this demo, this walkthrough right here, is this component screen. And this is really more of just like the on principle, the mindset of what we can do. Is what I've got here is this header component. I've actually got it right here. We can see it's just a component. I've not actually built it up with the controls right here. If I go right here, I can see what I've done. I've just got a background image, some text, and a border. But all I've got right here is, again, snapping the things like the widths and the heights based on other things that they're relative to. So yeah, really, really useful. If I go back to the screen, it's a way that I've just placed it there, but again, it's snapped to the width because I've got it having that behavior based on the control. So another good approach for reuse is if you're reusing these headers or menus or things across multiple screens, is really then abstracting this out instead of a local component, maybe creating a component library that you can use across multiple apps as well. So again, getting the benefit and the reuse out of those reusable responsive components. So yeah, can be super, super useful. Okay, one other thing I was going to mention as well, just about multi-device layout patterns. There's a really good article here by Luke Wroblewski, very, very good. And many people do refer to this article, even though it's from back in 2012. He's got this really good approach and explained it very, very well with some diagrams here about how those different layouts change. So the first one here, there's only a few, but mostly Fluid is trying to use this column drop technique, but sometimes can leave a margin just really to fill the screen and the size, those specific size of those, what those columns might be. The column drop is really what we see very similar to what the model-driven app does and what I was using there with the gallery as well, getting the wrap count to change based on the width, ideally filling that full width of the screen. But if you do go down, you go from 3 down to 2, and then vertically stack them when needed as well. So this one's really, really common across many Power Apps that I've seen, model-driven and Canvas. We've got some other ones where you get Layout Shifter, where you can do some really crazy layouts or completely mix things up based on the width as well if you need to. Tiny Tweaks is really just not breaking it down into columns, but actually changing the layout of all the controls on the screen and just making those fine-tuned manual tweaks where required. And then off Canvas, I've not seen this for a little while, but where you might actually have some kind of horizontal scroll to be able to see all the content of the screens as well. That's another option. So it's a really good article. I do know many people who reference responsive design actually refer to Luke's article because it's a seminal article and very well explained as well. There are other patterns, but these are some of the more common ones that I see time and again as well. So jump back to the slide. So yeah, just to wrap things up, the things we covered there is why would we want a responsive app? Model-driven app, have it out the box, massive time saver, and does really well. The Canvas app ones, we went through a few different options, especially with containers and galleries there as well. And then that really good article by Luke there on those multi-device layout patterns. So if you're still with us, I've made it to the end of this session. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And again, if we've got time for quick questions, great. I noticed the chat's been active, so hopefully a lot of answers in there. If not, feel free to reach out to me after this session. Thank you.